give us the opportunity to take little steps towards that. I think that's really all that I have to say. And now, because you can see that clown or jester, that actually was to remind me that Bryce Ives is on next, because Bryce is always a bit of a clown. And Bryce is someone who I'm sure a lot of people here know and has been involved in the Grants Advisory Committee, but is also just generally a person that has great content ideas. So Bryce, you're unmuted and you can take the floor.
Yeah, well, thanks for calling me a clown. Really lovely. So I guess that we've been thinking for some time about what would make interesting content and how does the community broadcasting sector stand in 2013 in an exceptionally saturated media environment. And this content grant round, I see it as really being an opportunity for stations to do things that probably we've always wanted to do, but we just haven't had the time or the resources to get around to doing them. And I guess that, you know, that doesn't mean it needs to be a 1-hour program that happens every week, or you know, the 3-hour magazine program that happens every Saturday morning. It might be a little bit more unique, a little bit more particular, a little bit more focused. It might be just a series of 5-minute interviews that are well packaged, that are about the history of a place, or about a particular moment in a town, or a particular moment in a community. It might be long-form documentary making. There's a real desire from audiences to listen to audio documentaries. And I think Nicola has alluded to the community sector doing live interview-based programming, flow programming really well. But in fact, over the years, we've sort of lost that craft of audio documentary making or high quality, longer form bits of content. So I guess that the challenge which I would put out to people is how is this content important beyond just the usual flow of a day-to-day live radio station? Does it have a long tail? Is it content that, if it's put online, is going to be of interest in 2 weeks, 5 weeks, 20 weeks, you know, 200 weeks' time? And I think that every station has the capacity to generate that sort of content. And in a way, this fund can enable that sort of thinking. So, I mean, I think about the stuff that I listen to regularly that inspires me. And obviously everyone would know the stuff like This American Life and Radio Lab. But there's been a podcast I've been really into, and it's called 99% Invisible. And it's like This American Life, because it is a proper radio show that goes out on local public radio in the US. But it's also available for podcast, and you can subscribe to it, and I really recommend that you do. And the thing I love about this show is how particular it is, because it's all about design and architecture. So it's about the 99% of the invisible stuff that happens around us, the human experience. And because it's very particular, it means that the program makers can zoom in and do interesting things around the content. It's like when you suddenly decide what something is about and you provide framing. You know, we are very particular about just architecture, and that's what our program is going to be. In some ways, then you can be more creative as a result. And this is like head and shoulders some of the most creative and interesting radio I've heard in some time. Now, I guess that I bring that up because I think right now, you know, we're really struggling. In Australia, we don't have many great examples of programs who are really using these new opportunities well. So if we look at the commercial sector, they're pretty much still doing what they've always been doing. And if we look at the ABC and SBS, that's a little bit of new innovation coming through using social media, blogging, whatever else. But when it comes to the actual audio content, there's not much we can see in Australia that, you know, is truly inspiring and interesting. My thing as a passionate community broadcaster is I want to see stations taking on the challenge of generating new sorts of content that might be completely out of the realms of the day-to-day operations, but in a way enable new sorts of conversations, activate new dialogues within communities. So I'm thinking about stuff we've funded over the last little while that's been really interesting. And I'd love to draw everyone's attention to 3MBS. Many of you would know 3MBS as being the classical music radio station in Melbourne. And, you know, some of you would also know it's very famous for its CD library, one of the greatest CD library systems ever known to volunteers anywhere in the world. It's like, you know, the greatest bureaucracy that's ever been established in a CD library filing system. But this is a station that has a very particular community, which is people who love classical music. And it's a station that's been around for 30 years and has quite a significant history. But what's interesting is over the last couple of years, they've started to tap into this content fund to do really new and interesting things that they would never have otherwise done as a volunteer-based presenter group. One of them is a program called Countdown to the Ring. And if you want to go to countdowntothering.com, you'll see this program. This is actually a 10-episode, highly produced program leading up to Wagner's The Ring Cycle, which is happening in Melbourne in 2013. And of course, this is a massive event for the classical music community. But this program, in a way, is highly produced, highly particular. It needed a staff member to help drive it alongside volunteers. It needed elements of research that were way beyond what one would normally do for a day-to-day program. But the result is a flagship within the station, something which can spark new sorts of conversations. Another program from 3MBS, which I think is really interesting, is called Inside Out. Now, both of these programs have been funded by the content round. Inside Out is a series of live forums where panels of experts from across the breadth and width of the arts come together to discuss and debate the big questions at the core of artistic practice. So recently, I joined a panel discussion about the future of opera. Now, this sort of discussion might have happened informally in the past on a program, on a flow program, but the difference with this program, Inside Out, is that it's recorded in front of a studio audience. There is a highly curated sense of guests on the program and a real sense of research to bring the program together. And then you have this compelling content. So, I mean, people could turn around and say, well, 3MBS is a really big station, it's a metropolitan station, and, you know, that's all very well, but we come from smaller stations, how are we ever going to do anything like that? And I guess that, you know, what I would say back to that is I think every station has the capacity to look at the community and to look at the programming that's happening on the station and say, what are we not doing right now? What is the one thing that we're not doing that could be really interesting? And with a little bit of grant money could enable or activate larger conversations. The Ring Cycle and Inside Out have activated much larger conversations in that community. And it has a knock-on effect for all of the radio that happens on 3MBS. I think about stuff like 2MDR, who are producing radio plays right now. So they're using the Content Fund to commission scripts from local playwrights. The radio plays are being recorded live in local aged care facilities. So that's just using the existing OB equipment and getting out into the community and doing something which would have otherwise been too difficult to do in the day-to-day operations. Because there's a grant there, it enables this sort of creative idea, this creative content to happen. For BSR, which are broadcasting a program on CRN at the moment, made up of live music recordings from touring Australian artists. Their program that we've funded is really about getting them on site into music venues and getting them on site into festivals to help record live music and share it. So, look, I think right now, Nicola, my personal thing is I see this content grant round as being an opportunity to enable and activate ideas that have possibly been, at the core of a station for a long time, but have never quite been possible. Maybe the content grant round is the one time in the year that stations get to do something that's a little bit different, that might inspire or provoke or titillate the community, but also will activate something more within a community as well. And when I say community, I mean both the community of radio makers within a station and, of course, the broader community which a station serves. So, look, I'm just really aware, Nicola, that I could probably talk about this underwater for the next 15 years. So maybe we should pass on right now and come back and take questions at some point.
Yeah, I think that makes sense, Bryce, because, I mean, like, while Bryce is talking about the content grants to be used to make kind of, I guess, special stuff that you've always dreamed about and, that might be a smaller project, of course the grants can be used for so many other things as well, like even funding positions. So I think it's a really good point to bring Maureen in and ask Maureen just to go a little bit through what the priorities are and the process, and that won't take very long. It'll just take 10 minutes, and then we really are opened up for questions. So I would say that you guys should start putting your questions in the chat box down the bottom. Maureen, if you want to go ahead.
Yep, thanks, Nicola. Yeah, so I guess the nuts and bolts of it is a grant program. And with all grants, whether it's with the Community Broadcasting Foundation or your local council or whatever, it's really, really important that you actually read the guidelines and make sure that you're really familiar with the eligibility. You get a good sense of what we're looking for from actually reading the guidelines. So this slide here is actually telling us what our funding priorities are. Now, not to say that you have to meet all of these priorities, but you should have, at least one or more of these if you're applying. If you can't tick any of these boxes, then unfortunately, you're probably going to be down the scale when we're assessing. So small volunteer-run stations, a demonstration of collaboration between a larger and a smaller station, so you might look to partner with a couple of stations in your region, a high proportion of spoken word content. Because we do have limited funding, we really do want to prioritise those programs that we've been talking about, where that are fairly talk dense. Strong and innovative engagement with the community. So we really do want to see real community engagement. So partnering with your local health service to do health segments or legal service or community groups. There are lots of things happening in your community that we'd like to see you working with them to create programs. Encouraging multiple contributors. So by that, not to say that one person can't make a fantastic program, but where you can actually have a couple of people collaborating, a couple of voices, different interviewers involved in a program, then that will get a higher priority than a single presenter. And then programs that actually utilize new media platforms, such as incorporating social media and online distribution. Now, as I said, you don't have to do all of those things, but you need to at least be doing one of those things in your application. So someone asked about how often are the rounds. So what we aim to do is to give away the majority of the money in the first round, which is the round that's closing in a couple of weeks. And we have several categories. So there's a national category, which is for programs that, and we actually have changed the categories around for this round because people were getting confused about what makes a national program and do they have to make their local program a national program. And I want to say from the outset that we equally prioritise programs that are local. A good local program up against a good national program have equal footing in our eyes. What we want to see is what the outcomes are from those programs. So we do have a national category for people who particularly want to target a national audience. And then we have annual programs, so people that want to apply for those programs that are going to be, every week throughout the life, the year of the station. We have salaries, and I'll talk a bit more about salaries in a moment. But we also have a new category this time around called OBs and special projects. So this is like small projects. You might want to make one documentary or you might want to do one outside broadcast. So we are going to reserve some money from this round so that we will at least have a second round for the OBs and special projects. So what do you need for your application process? Well, a good concept. For a weekly program, we really want to see that you've thought about how the program will develop over time. We do see some of the unsuccessful applications really haven't looked beyond program one. So they're telling us they want to do a weekly program or they want to do 6 months worth of programs, but they've only talked about what's going to go in program one. So that doesn't mean you have to have a whole year because obviously we want to, reflect what happens through the year, but we want to be able to see that the concept has got legs, that you have thought about, well, what might happen in program 2, 3, 4, etc. Evidence of agreement from community partners. So if you are looking to work with a community partner such as a local migrant resource centre or a health centre, just get a letter or an email from them to show that yes, they're really keen to be involved. And we really need an explanation as to why you think there is a need for the program. So we have seen some examples where people say, oh, we want to make a program about, and I'm just using off the top of my head here an example about gardening. But, they haven't actually explained why gardening is important in that particular community. So you might say it's important in every community, but we want you to have thought about the fact that it's a special area. Might be the Kimberley region, which has a special climate, and therefore gardening takes on a special needs that aren't going to be the same as they are in Victoria. So just something like that, why you think that will be important. So if you're networking with or collaborating with other stations, we also need to see evidence that other stations are supporting the program. So if you're going to partner with 2 or 3 stations and someone is taking the lead, then just again an email that you include in your application from the other stations saying that they're keen, or if you want to create a program that others are going to take. So we want to see that they're actually interested in taking that. I know some people get nervous about actually doing a demo, and how can I do a demo if we haven't, it's just a concept at the moment. Give us a feel for that concept. Maybe you can just make up 5 minutes of what you think it might sound like, just to give us a flavour of whether it's going to be energetic, lots of voices or whatever. So that's always a good thing, just to give us a sense of what you're thinking. And again, read the guidelines. Please read the guidelines. Answer all the questions. The questions are all worth points. So in the way the assessment happens, and we won't be going into a lot of detail, but there is a booklet that Nicola will be distributing which goes into this in more detail. How we actually score, every question is weighted. It might be worth 10 points or 10%. So if you choose to not answer that question, and sometimes people don't, for example, the evaluation question, which is the last question, most people barely even think about that question. Some people don't answer it at all. You're immediately losing 10% of your score if you're not answering that question, because we can't give you a score if you don't answer the question. And as a rule of thumb, in this area, you need to be getting 70% or more in your scoring. That's what we have found to actually get funded. So losing 10% is putting you well behind. Answer all the questions and contact a grants administrator. So Claire is full of good ideas there. So do talk to her. She's got the job of trying to read our minds. So I wish her luck with that, but that's a good thing to contact the grants administrator. They're full of good ideas. Now, these were some questions I think came in advance. What do I do if I don't have someone at the station to help us with online or production development? Now, it's quite possible you don't have those skills, but you may not know if you have those skills. So do check within your own volunteer audience first, and maybe somebody then knows somebody locally. It's highly likely, even in small communities, that you'll have a web developer in your community. Talk to other stations nearby or other stations that you know are doing similar things to what you would like to do. They might know of someone who's happy to come down and give you a little bit of training or insight into that. You can ring a larger station or contact your state or national sector body. And earlier I saw a post, there is some pathways training available too. So you might like to consider applying for some pathways training to actually skill up someone within your own station. Now, I've touched on this. So what do I do if I don't have examples of production? So record a sample of program you might like, that you think you might like to do, and that's with you, not somebody else's program. Or record yourselves talking about what the program will be like, because we really want to hear your enthusiasm. And we're only talking 5 minutes. And believe me, when you're assessing these, and we get maybe 60 to 70 applications, if not more, we don't want to be listening to an hour program. We physically haven't got the time to do it. So 5 minutes is a really good amount of time, and we should be able to tell within that 5 minutes whether you've got a good concept and whether you really know what you're, have the skills to do what you're doing. So demonstrate that you do have some of those skills to deliver the program. Now, salaries. A few people have asked about salaries. So, we have separated these out because, again, people are getting confused. So if what you're looking for is to fund somebody to make a single program, a local environmental program, that is a program. So you should be applying it within the program category. So if it's a single program, so you're looking for a salary for a single program, apply for programs. The salaries section, and again, read the guidelines, what they're related to is for positions that are dedicated, pardon me, as it says here, to overseeing content production across a range of programs. Excuse me. So not general administration, not management. And such positions must be responsible for the coordination of a range of programs at the station rather than specific to one program only. And we've got some examples on the next slide. Okay, pardon me, I'm just coughing here. So a talks coordinator, and these are just a couple of examples. It doesn't have to be this, you might have your own ideas. Someone who helps to coordinate and improve interviews for all programs across the station. So we have had funded a few of these where people say, look, we get inquiries all the time from people who might want to be interviewed, but we haven't got anybody who can direct those interviews to the right program. So your talks coordinator might do that. They might, say, okay, now this would be a really good program for the breakfast show, or this would be a really good interview for the blues program. So you have a person like that who is not necessarily on air themselves or making programs, but will actually help coordinate talk-based content. A program manager, so someone who helps with the schedule, coordinate and improve all programs across the station. They have to have a particular focus on generating new content. So the program manager might identify, oh, look at our program, we don't have any youth programs. So that person would actually have to take, you would fund this person to identify the gaps within your program when you look at your community, and that person would actually look at making connections and developing people who might want to come on and do that youth program. We've got a couple of other examples on the next slide. So a community access coordinator. Now this would be someone who actually actively identifies community groups who could be making their own programs. So say for example you might identify that you've got a Lions Club, a Rotary Club, a Probus Club, whatever, who might be involved with a program that could be around service clubs and service club activities. Now the community access coordinator would have the role of going out and talking to those groups, introducing the idea of making a radio program, because often people haven't even heard of the radio, let alone thought that they could actually make a radio program. And so this person would provide the community access. They would, again, look at those groups and actually help them understand what making a radio program is about, introduce them to how they do training, etc., and then introduce them to the station. And then we have a digital content coordinator. So for those stations who have gone digital or want to have a presence on their website of programs, maybe make podcasts just for the web. So it could be a person like that who would coordinate that kind of content. And look, they're just 4 ideas, but you can see that the salary is quite separate. It's not a program maker per se. It's someone who facilitates and actually helps improve talk content on the station in a range of roles. Okay, are there standard costs I can use to pay producers? So it really does depend. Every station seems to have a different arrangement. What we look for is what is reasonable. And most people either, if people want to employ under the community award, which is the SACS award, then they have whatever hourly rate they think is appropriate for that level. Or they might go for the journalist or the MEAA award, where they would actually look at what a producer's salary is. So it shouldn't just be, we had one person who just picked off the top of their head $150 an hour. Now that to us was ridiculous, really. So it needs to be reasonable, and if you can look at the awards, which you can find online, then that's the best rule of thumb. And another question came in, can I charge for use of station studio time? No, we don't favour that. We see that as in-kind support. So the same as your volunteer hours, some stations don't want to use their volunteers, but they don't put them in their budget. So you should actually show that as a contribution that you're making. So you might be asking us for $20,000, but you can show that you're actually contributing by providing the own studio, letting people use the computer, and providing volunteer support. Can I pay someone to develop web pages? Now, OGAC, which is another committee within the Community Broadcasting Foundation, they fund full websites. So I would suggest you look at them first, because one thing we don't fund is anything that can be funded somewhere else within the CBF. But if you've got an existing web page and what you're really just looking for, or a website, and you're just looking for a page to add to your station's web page, then yes, we would consider that. Can I pay a photographer, video operator? Yes, but ideally include quotes from external contractors. That will strengthen your application. It's not essential, but it will get you more points if you have actually got those quotes there. Okay, so again, in the booklet that we'll be distributing, I've got, and the booklet was actually written with small stations in mind, but the examples apply to everybody. Here are some other items, and there's a big list in that booklet, but even if, so a project coordinator, so some stations don't want to pay people to actually make programs, and that's fantastic. A lot of stations operate very successfully, fully volunteer run. But you might want to just have a short-term project coordinator who's not going to make the program, but is going to help coordinate the project. You might need to hire special equipment for a particular project, say for a radio play. You might need some different equipment there. The contractors refer to like the photographer or the video recordist. Artist fees. If you're broadcasting a local play, you might want to pay a small artist fee to the writer for that play. Or your actors, you might like to pay a small fee. That's all acceptable within the application. Subscriptions, for example, the cost of newspapers or online subscriptions. This would primarily be for those ongoing programs, a yearly program. Copyright fees, if you need to purchase music. Training, now we're talking about short workshops here, not full-on training, but if you wanted to get someone in to teach you how to use Audacity, for example, you can include that. It has to be very relevant to the program. So local transport costs, if you're doing a program where you're going to go around and interview people in all the nursing homes, then you can count the petrol in that case, and phone costs as directly related to the program. And they're just some of the ideas. There are more in this booklet. Now, not being successful doesn't mean you should give up. I think we said that at the start, but for people who've joined us late, we've had people who applied round 1, didn't get it, got some feedback, applied round 2, got a bit closer, and third time lucky, they got their grant. So, you know, we are happy to give feedback. Often it's, you know, the best feedback I can give you again is to make sure you're answering all the questions. And we sometimes get feedback to say, look, all the questions seem the same. They're actually not. So if you're thinking they are, you're not interpreting the questions well. So again, another ad for the booklet, but we have actually tried to describe those questions a bit better there. So you can get some feedback. As I mentioned, most successful applicants need to score over 70% or above. It is very competitive, but that doesn't mean, you know, you're not going to be successful. Good chance, you know, that you will be if you keep trying. I think you've got the hint now to answer all questions and make no assumptions. Often people think, even though I think collectively across our committee we've got about 150 years experience in community broadcasting, which makes us all sound very old, and some of us perhaps are, but that doesn't mean we know exactly about your station or your community. So please, you know, tell us a story. Give us the story of why you want to make this program and how this program, you know, will make a difference to your community. Don't assume we know who you are or who the people are that are going to be involved with making the program. That will help convince us. Yes, Nicola, I am speaking for myself when it comes to age.
Thanks, Maureen. I'm going to leave your microphone. I'm actually, this is tricky. I want you to mute yourself and then unmute yourself when you talk, because I realized that at the beginning you were actually struggling with some echo that was coming from Bryce. And Bryce, same for you. I'm going to unmute you, and you can mute yourself and unmute yourself as people ask questions. And then I'm going to go down the list and find Stephen Hahn, who's been collecting the questions so far, and unmute him to actually start pitching the questions. I'd suggest that if other people have got questions coming up, put them in the chat window and we'll pick up on them, but let's go. Stephen, let's go. I thought that I unmuted you, but I'll just check. Oh, funny. I did unmute you. How's that? Go there. I've unmuted everyone now. How's that? Go there. I've unmuted everyone now.
Sounds like shit.
No.
Sounds like shit.
Someone's...
I think you've got everybody on now.
Okay, he's just hang on a sec as Stephen jumps onto Geordie's, because he seems to have a problem with his audio. I'm going to mute everyone again. We won't be a second. We're just all in the office here, so it's not a problem. I'm pretty sure, Bryce and Maureen, you should be able to unmute yourself, but I'll keep my eye on that. And we'll just get...
unmuted.
And Stephen will come on.
Okay, you're unmuted now. From this one. This is Geordie here, testing the mic for Stephen. Okay, it's coming. He's coming. I'll sort out your printing process.
Oh, dear me. So just while we're waiting for Stephen, isn't that funny? You can't unmute, Bryce. Thanks for checking that. I think what's got to happen, Bryce, is that I unmute you, and now you mute yourself. Try that. You seem to be still unmuted, but anyway, go for it, Stephen. I can't hear you.
Muted. Unmuted.
Not working.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, lovely.
Okay, great. Still waiting for the questions to print, but one of the ones that I do recall off the top was the length of content, and is something that is 5 minutes in length acceptable?
Yeah, I'll take that. Yes. If the content only requires a 5-minute format, then that is absolutely acceptable. And I think that the challenge that we're putting out to everybody is finding the format and the style that works for the content. So not making the assumption that a program that happens for an hour a week, 52 weeks a year, is the program that we're going to fund. If it is 7 15-minute episodes and that's what is required, then it's something which we will consider.
Okay, so there's another question about programs that are currently funded. Are they eligible for funding in this round?
I'll take that. So it depends. You have to make the case each year, and it depends, again, what categories you're applying for. So we don't allow for overlap. But if you applied last year, for example, and you again want to apply for the, so you applied last year for funding for this calendar year, and now you want to apply this September for next calendar year, that is okay. But you need to make the case each year. How is your program going to develop? We don't want to just see same old, same old. So talk about what you've achieved in the last program and why you need support again this year to continue the program and what you hope to achieve by continuing it for a further year.
Okay. There's an interesting question which I'm trying to recall, so I still don't have them printed in front of me, but it was about collaboration. And the question was along the lines of, if you wish to collaborate in one of these content development grants, is it only between licensed stations? Could you potentially collaborate with an online station?
It would be only between licensed stations.
Okay. Now, does that also exclude aspirant broadcasters? I'm actually just found the question now.
TCBL, so TCBL stations are eligible if they have a cumulative, and this is all in the guidelines, have been broadcasting cumulatively for 2 years. So they might have been for 5 years, but have been on air for 2 years over that 5-year period.
Yeah, that makes me think, I think it was 8CCC in the Northern Territory. It was an aspirant for like 15 years or something, I think, weren't they?
Yeah, but I think they're licensed now. Actually, we've funded quite a couple of programs up there that are very good. Yeah,
so they have finally got over that license hurdle, but that's a good example of how if it is an aspirant or a TCBL, they're still eligible. Okay, there's another one here. Can you include the salary for a co-producer, e.g. a media student? How often can you apply for the grants, and is there a limit to how many grants you can get in?
So look, it's up to you to decide who are going to be the program makers and how you're going to do it. So yes, you could have a co-producer. You could just have a whole series of people who are contributors that you want to fund. So it's up to you to decide on that. We do have we look for value for content, I guess. So you need to justify why you've got those particular figures in there. In terms of a limit, yes, there is a limit of 5 applications per financial year per station. So your station can only apply for 5, well, can apply for more, but you're only going to be funded for 5 per station. And I think there was a third part to that question, which I can't remember now.
Is there a limit to the amount you can get in? I think you've answered it. This is an interesting one. What program ideas do you consider stale or too over-applied for in the grants category?
I don't know if you want to go onto this, Bryce, but I will just say just your general magazine program. So a lot of people will, particularly in the early rounds, we haven't seen so many, maybe because we didn't fund any, but your general magazine program, which is just really a couple of people talking, reading out community announcements, playing music. That kind of program is unlikely to be funded.
Okay.
Can I just butt in there? I just wanted to ask on that because I think that it's even coming through some of the other questions. When we're talking about a weekly program, a general magazine program, are we better off putting applications in for definitive series of something rather than an ongoing program? I mean, what would your advice be there?
look,
I
we can
think
do
that's an
both.
interesting question.
Yeah. You go, Bryce.
Now I'm trying to work out how to use the mute button, and now I'm like paranoid that Jean Rao can't understand what I'm saying. So, yeah, look, I mean, I think that's an interesting question, and it comes back to like a really difficult point in any creative grant round, whether it's for theatre, for visual arts, for music, or for radio content, which is the people who are at the core of the project, they're the key artists or the key program makers, need to decide what is the best way to tell the story. So if it's an ongoing program, well, yeah, then that's what it is. And if it's a very specific short burst, then that's what it is as well. But thinking has to happen, and I guess, Nicola, what we see is people who just assume that the around-the-clock broadcast framework that we've been in radio over the last 80 years is the right way to work, and they haven't questioned those assumptions. So I think that's a discussion for the program makers. What is the best way for us to tell this story or to make this program? And then you explain to GGAC the reasons why you've made the decisions you've made.
Okay, back to me.
If I just add to that, I guess.
Go ahead, Maureen.
That's okay, Stephen. I was just going to say that just adding to that, we have funded programs. There are some programs that GGAC's been funding for a very long time that have been on the national scale. But what they do is that they're not doing the same thing every year. They might be Women on the Line as an example of a program that has been running for a very long time, and we have funded quite a number of years. But it's not Women on the Line as it was in the 1980s. It has reinvented itself as it goes along to remain current. So that is a weekly program which still has life and relevance because of the program makers and the way it's made. So on a local level, that could be the same thing. There could be a local youth program, because there are always young people coming through that you think, it has value in being funded. But equally, it could be just a series of 5-minute segments that you want to make about, something significant. And that's equally valid.
Okay, I have a direct funding question here. If the funding is for 1 year's part-time salary, can you get funding for more years? And I think that it means, can you apply for the person to be in the role for 2 years, ongoing?
No, not at this stage. So it's really an annual thing. You could reapply for a subsequent year, but you can only apply for 1 year. And I'll explain the reason why.
Can I just jump in there? Maureen, I just wanted to ask to clarify that. Can I just clarify that just in terms of, like, often when you apply for a position, you're asked what will happen after the position is not funded? Like, how will the work be ongoing when the position's not funded? So really, I think that question is just about, like, you apply for it 1 year, can you apply for the same position in the second year? And I think you've just answered that, yes?
Yes. So again, you need to make the case. So we understand, particularly with positions like the community access type role, community development takes a long time. It might take you the first year to get, 1 or 2 programs happening, because it takes a long time to go out and do the talking to the people and introduce them to the radio station. They need to and ah a bit. So you're not going to achieve, we're very realistic about what you might achieve, but you need to be realistic as well. So you might then come back to us a year later and say, look, it's been great. We've done this and this. We've now got interest from these groups. We need this position for another year in order to make this happen.
Okay, whilst on the community access role, there's a direct question. Could the community access coordinator or web content coordinator be a member of the board? Do you see a problem with them being a board member?
Look, that's really up to the station to decide who they're going to recruit. Sorry, you go, Bryce.
No, I was just going to say, I mean, it's as long as things have been considered and thought through, so that it's an open and transparent process, that a board member just hasn't decided themselves that they're going to do that job. That's all we need to know, really.
Okay, so as long as the stations are, managing that process in a fair and transparent fashion. There's just, that's about it so there's one more question I do want to ask, which has just appeared on screen now, but a couple of comments that were also noted through the chat window. Martin Walters, who's with the CRN, says pre-recording is also a good idea if you're planning to package your show for national distribution, and that CRN are currently collating a series of radio plays and interviews about how stations tackle their respective production, hoping to share inspiration and ideas. So keep an eye on the CRN and CBAA emails for updates on that. There was also another question about the CRN, or linked to that, which was national airing is planned very far ahead, so it's hard to get in. And in relation to that, I'd like to say that, simply give Martin a call here at CBAA and ask to have a chat to him, and he can speak to you about that process and when the grid is changed and what type of programmings they're looking for. And he's always really, I think Martin's still in the room, he's really happy to have that conversation with any stations out there. So we have a question here in the chat window, which is, we're running a Bollywood program on 6EBA for quite a while now. Rather than focusing on gossip, it focuses on the history of Hindi cinema, culture and customs that were influenced by Bollywood. Does this count as new content? I think it's there because the program has been running, so, is it deemed as new content if it's an existing program? I think that's what's meant.
Yeah. It might be or it might not be. You go, Bryce.
I feel like I'm on a delay here. Sorry. I mean, yeah. I think that the thing that I would ask back to the program maker is, what's unique about the content that you want to fund through the content grant round? This is it's a large amount of money for the community sector, but it's actually not an endless supply of money, and we need to be strategic as a sector about how we use this money. So it should really be about enabling or fueling or activating things that are interesting to program makers and to stations. And I think that an existing program, in a way, we've got to think about what's the hook. Like, why does the program now need funding? So in the Bollywood program case, it might be because they focus on a very particular element of Bollywood. Like, they create a series of podcasts introducing Bollywood to people who know nothing about it. And as part of that, they need to script things and research things and, source different types of music. So, then there's a hook, there's a reason why we should think about funding it. But yeah, I mean, look, that's a tough question. Of course, there are no absolutes in this, and nor should there be.
Yeah, but so Bryce, what you're saying now that I'm picking up on, and I just want to clarify because I think a couple of the questions have touched on this. Araya's doing a Bollywood program at 6EBA already, and that what you're suggesting is that she might actually consider a segment in that program that looks at the history of Bollywood and what it means and what it is, as a series of segments within that, what is probably a 1 or 2 hour program. Is that what you're suggesting, that she applies for funding for a part of that program?
Yeah, that would be absolutely fine. I mean, I think it's about enhancing or enabling those sorts of discussions to happen on community radio, so yes.
I can also imagine a very nice web presence of something like that that documents a bit of history of Bollywood for Australian audiences.
Oh, absolutely.
There was another.
Absolutely. Also, Australia has a very interesting relationship with Bollywood as well. That could be another angle to explore.
There's another question there. I don't want to take over Stephen's job, but I just saw it from Tegan Hughes. Would a program that documents historical musical events be eligible? It's not necessarily a community feel unless you call all festival punters a community. I'm not sure what you mean by that, Tegan. If you're still here, maybe you might like to actually speak to that yourself. I'll just unmute you, Tegan, if you want to just explain what you meant.
Oh, hi. Yeah, cool. Hi, thanks. Thanks, by the way, for everyone for putting this on. This is amazing. I guess what I'm meaning, it's a program that I created a couple of years ago and ran a season of, and the concept essentially It's like a program that goes to different festivals, past, present, or future, and it sort of documents what happened at that festival anywhere in the world as well. It's not just Australian festivals. And it's sort of like a package thing of one, reminiscing, but it's also for upcoming festivals as well, so it's a lot of promotion as well. Would something like that be...
So were you thinking about that as a series?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay,
And you go to
let's get an
different
answer
festival
from...
each week.
Okay, let's get an answer.
If I might just jump in here, it might. Again, it all depends on how you're presenting it. But if you're looking at doing something, well, what we really want to, I guess, see is the local involvement of the local station. So I'm not sure what station you're attached to, but why would your station be interested in producing a series of festival programs that might be local to other stations? So it could be a perfect example of how you could collaborate with a local station and get their perspectives on that. And I should just say that one thing we don't fund is international travel. So for local, yes, but for international, no. And it's just purely, we've just got to be careful about where the money goes when it's limited. But yes, look, I can imagine that idea as sort of documenting, working with Warrnambool on the Port Fairy Folk Festival and then working with Byron Bay for the Blues Festival and that kind of thing to actually curate a series like that might be something that's very interesting.
Okay, damn, I was just planning my next trip to Glastonbury, and you just killed it by saying you don't fund overseas trips. Stephen, do you have any more questions? I think we're coming to an end.
Yeah, there are a couple more. I might just package them up into together. What are the limits on the funding? Does the content need to be of national interest, or can it be focused locally? And this last question is something we did touch on earlier, but it's, can we include web development costs within a program grant and not a specific website grant, e.g. working on an existing website to include new content? So I think we can kind of, I'll just say that this is being recorded so we can also play it back to people who may have joined later on.
Okay, I'm never very good at remembering 3 questions at once. So in terms of the web stuff, yes, if you I guess adding value to an existing website that's particularly related to the program, so you're creating content that will go on a particular page on your station website, then yes, we would consider that. The limit of the fund, well, there is a limit across the the whole year. I think it's 1.34 million or something, which does sound like a lot of money, but when you start, that funds a lot of things, including the National Radio News Service. So we look for value for content. So some people apply for a grant of $1,500 because that's what they need in order to make a particular documentary. Others, around the $25,000 mark for a half-hour weekly program. So you can get an idea by looking at what we have funded previously to get an idea of where we're sort of looking. But in saying that, technically there's no limit, but you have to really argue as to why you need that funding. And I think there was a third part.
Yes, there was, and I'm being bagged out for asking a triple barrel, but I just want to wrap it up, so I do apologise. Can we just kind of clarify the national interest and local community focus? So
yes.
does the content need to be of national interest, or can it focus on the local community? And I can keep jumping in and be a really bad interviewer. I can answer it for you if you wish.
That's okay.
Vote for me, 7th of September.
The national, whoever asked that question, I did say earlier, you might not have heard it, that we actually we've actually separated out the national programs into a separate category. That's so people don't feel obliged to make national program. We were finding that people were wanting to make a really good local program and then saying, we're happy for this to go national. They're quite different programs. So if you're applying in the national category, yes, it has to have a national focus. If you're applying to do a local program about all the local halls in your community and sort of a social history or something, it can be very local. So it can be either they're weighted equally in our eyes. What we're looking for is the outcomes for your community.
Fantastic. I think that's just about all we have time for. It's been a pretty good webinar since it's only 7:05, so we've covered a lot in a very short time. Have to say a million thanks to Maureen and to Bryce, who's actually left to go off and be creative somewhere else, in his house somewhere. And to everyone that's come along, I think that we're finding these webinars really useful. I particularly, and I'm seeing some wonderful feedback here, but I also just really love the idea of, just for a moment we have this presence of all these people from all different radio stations kind of tuning in simultaneously. It sort of makes me feel better and inspires me a bit. And that just brings us to the end, where I want to just point you to some other places you might go to get inspired. The CBAA monthly podcast actually has covered a lot of issues that we covered tonight. It's definitely worth tuning into that every month, because you do get information and stuff explained. It's similar to what we've done tonight, but about a range of things. So make sure you actually subscribe to that podcast. Also, on the CMTO website, we have videos that are talking about new media production, and what they are actually videos with producers who've been doing really interesting projects. And also we have a lot of really inspirational audio on CMTO Audio Lab. So check out the CMTO website. And also, I think it's really important that you just kind of maybe contact some of the people who have done projects at some stations and talk to them. So I hope that this has helped you all. It's been great having you, and CBAA is going to be coming back. We're going to be doing another webinar next month. Next month is going to be all about AMRAP, and I tell you, AMRAP's doing some really exciting things. You want to get onto this webinar and have Chris Johnson tell us what is the new stuff that's happening in AMRAP. It's really, really exciting. I've been looking at it in the last week. So please come back. Great to see you there from K&D. I love this. Like, I could just stay here forever, but it is 7 o'clock at night, and we probably all should go home. And thanks, Maureen, especially for coming on tonight. Good luck, everyone, with their applications. And the booklet will be emailed to you automatically. Someone else asked, would the PowerPoint be emailed? We'll load that so it goes in, and you'll also get a link to the recording of this session. We notoriously forget to press record at the beginning of this, and we almost did tonight, but Geordie managed to do it in the first few minutes, so it just missed the first few minutes, so you can watch it again. Okay, thanks a lot, guys. PowerPoint is great. Yeah, I tried to make it a bit funny, but Anyway, we'll see you later, and have a good week, and hopefully you'll come back and visit us next month in the webinar. Ciao. Thanks, Stephen. Thanks, Jordana.
I'm not